I've had a lot of different ideas for games over the years, and most of them just feel like sort of derivative or not that interesting. And I've tried to develop a couple of things just with PowerPoint slides so that I get a rough idea of, somebody can beta test it. And this particular one.
So we just got done chatting with Jeff Chen of the game I'mSqueezy.com. And Aaron, what did you love about that interview?
So many things it's hard to pick, but I'll just go with his persistence and the fact that he created prototypes and he really actively sought feedback and really refined and honed the game Squeezy based on a lot of early feedback and just his persistence to figure it out. So what were some of your takeaways, Nate?
Yeah, just kind of coming at this with a beginner's mindset. He really just put himself out there to learn JavaScript, SQL, putting together a puzzle and just having no experience. I think it just is inspiring to know that even at our age, we can always approach things with a beginner's mindset. So that was a great interview, and here we go. Here's Jeff. Jeff is a writer by trade and authored works such as the Ultra Ball series and Bridge Crosswords. He has created many puzzles for different publications such as the New York Times, the LA Times, the Wall Street Journal, and many others, and is also recognized by Will Shortz himself as a prolific crossword maker. He is also a philanthropist and charity proponent, being the vice president of the Paramidas Foundation, which is dedicated to supporting causes that are humanitarian and scholastic. He has also personally donated around 13 gallons of blood with a lifetime goal of 20 gallons. He created Squeezy, a recent game with the help of Jim Horn, and it is a daily game that works kind of by creating new words by inserting given tiles in between existing letters of those words. Each level results in a special word that is made up of the tiles inserted, and every level has only one definite answer. After finishing all the levels of a daily session, a fact linking all special words will be revealed at the very end. Jeff, we're so excited you're here.
Thanks to have me. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to chat.
Yeah, we're excited. And we usually kick this off just by asking, what's your favorite game to play?
Right now, I'm really into connections. I know Wina from the editing team at the New York Times, and I just love the way her mind works and makes these links that some of them I just never would have thought of. And some of them I still, I get to the very end and I have 4 squares left. I think, well, I don't know. Tell me, go ahead. And I'm usually surprised.
We've got a little family thread going with that right now. My wife, my brother-in-law, and my son. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Sounds like you've got a little bit of insight on how those are created. Are those all by the same puzzle creator?
Most of the puzzles on the New York Times game site have one editor that's kind of in charge of everything. And Wina's I've never met her in person, unfortunately, but we've exchanged lots of emails, and she's super, super nice. So it's been great to see her have success with that.
I'm so curious. So how does someone get into crossword puzzle making?
Mostly falling ass backward into it. So back in 2008, I had just come off of working at a startup, which a friend started back in 2002. And we were working crazy hours and just burning out pretty badly. By the time 2008 rolled around, things had been going much better. And so I took the opportunity to exit and got some flexibility that way. I was really thankful for that opportunity. But at that point, I was trying to figure out what the hell should I do with my life? Well, what am I going to be when I grow up? And I didn't have any answers. So I started trying a whole bunch of things, including writing, crosswords, philanthropy, travel, just you name it. I've probably tried it. Even some coding, things like that. And I had met my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and we started exploring some things. And she had always been a crossword solver her entire life. So she was able to solve the New York Times Sunday crossword in about 15 minutes. And some of our first dates, I had just started doing crosswords kind of out of curiosity. And we would sit down with 2 copies of the New York Times crossword on a Sunday, have coffee, have breakfast. She'd be done quickly. And sometimes 3 hours later, I'd still be sitting there trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And that got shorter and shorter, but still she was always able to beat me by quite a long margin. And finally, I just decided one day, I kind of want to try making one of these because, like everybody, I saw the movie Wordplay and realized that there are human beings behind this thing. And I figured, okay, well, I'll try it. And I made one, and it was terrible. Thankfully, Jill, my wife, is very, very sympathetic and empathetic. So she gave me a lot of support, and I submitted it anyway, even though she kind of gently and kindly tried to say, this is terrible. And Will wrote me back pretty quickly, actually, and said, hey, thanks for the submission. I think you have a lot of promise. However, there are some rules with crosswords, including you shouldn't make up your own words. Like in one little corner of the grid, I couldn't fill it because I was doing everything by hand and graph paper. And all I could figure out was sun, SUNSON. And I figured, well, Apollo must have had a child, right? So I put that in. And of course, he said, this would never fly, but try again. So I kept on trying. And he was really polite and encouraging the entire way, all throughout submissions 1 through 5, up to 10, up to 15, up to 20. And every single one of them ultimately was a rejection. And finally, Jill had an idea on the crossword, and she wanted to figure out how to lay it out. And I said, no, you can't. I've learned a lot. You can't do it that way. It's just not going to work. She said, well, why don't we just try it? Let's see what happens. Oh, no, it's not going to work. Why don't we just look? Just try it once, see if it works. And of course, it just serendipitously worked out. And within a couple of weeks, we had our first acceptance, which tells you who's the brains in the operation.
That's great. I think sounds like you've got a great partner in more ways than one there.
Yeah.
And also that's really intriguing that usually you think of like anything involving publishing, like you're lucky to get an acknowledgement of a rejection, and to get like that kind of candid feedback and active feedback from Will Shorts. That's amazing. So kudos to you for, keeping at it and keeping with it. And that also speaks really highly of Will too.
Absolutely. He is amazing at what he does. I mean, he certainly has critics, and he certainly could do some things better. But and overall, I've been really impressed with his process and just how much time and attention he spends with the submissions.
I'm just so curious about like the process of creating a puzzle. So do you come up with like you have the grid, but are you just kind of coming up with words and then questions or hints to get like how do you tackle this? Like how would someone start?
The biggest thing by far is trying to figure out a good idea, or what they call a theme behind a crossword. So kind of a connection that sort of like connections, some way that links 4 really good, colorful phrases together that's surprising, that might generate that's pretty cool. So you have to start with that. And then the entire process of laying out a crossword gets into technical details, which it's not that difficult to learn, but it takes a lot of practice to go through and get good. And once you get the right tools in place, it really doesn't take nearly as long as most people think. I think a 15 by 15 crossword these days, once I get the idea and the theme phrases, most of the time, if there's nothing really difficult about a particular set of constraints or anything like that. Everything might come together in 2 or 3 hours.
That's much quicker than I thought. The first puzzle that you did, which took weeks, sounds more accurate.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and it's gotten a lot easier, but it's still a learning process. After 15 years of doing this, I recently heard from the editing team that they liked an idea that I sent in. However, they wanted to change some of the theme entries, and did I have any other alternatives that I could sub in? And I had a couple, so we agreed on some things, and I put a grid together and sent it back in. And Christina, who's one of the people on the editing team, she's great, she's fantastic, said, overall, we just think as a team that it's got too much crosswordese. You have the Dutch cheese, Edam, but you pluralized it and that sort of thing. And, I let things slide, and definitely I know I need to go back and correct things. So kind of blow up the entire thing and start over again, and keep in mind specific editors' tastes and try to do better.
So outside of, crossword creation, can you tell us a little more about just it seems like you've been in and around puzzles for quite some time. And can you tell us about some of your other puzzle involvement?
Yeah, I think it started back in college when there was this thing called The Game, based on a movie, I think. But overall, it was this 24 to 48 hour kind of whirlwind of activity where you didn't go to sleep. You got a clue with some sort of code that could be mathematical, could be foreign language based, could be just about anything, lateral thinking. And when you solved it, it would tell you where to go next. And it was so compelling. I would just love doing it. And after graduating, work sort of got in the way of things. But then I started getting more into these online puzzle hunts, and there's same sort of thing. There's one called the Puzzle Boat, which a group of us look forward to every year, where it's roughly 100 puzzles that all work together to get a set of meta answers. And those meta answers all feed into each other to come up with a meta. And, like 100 puzzles, you think, well, okay, if you have 6 people, you can kind of crank through them. But one of the puzzles this year took me about 6 hours to figure out. And it was all about the way that bell chimes work. And it involved the switching of, different pairs of bell chimes, and you had to go back and figure out. Actually, I had to write some computer code to figure out, like, how would I go determine the initial setting of these bells. So super, super fun, and I've met a lot of really interesting people that way. Hey, one guy that I got to be friends with online that I've only seen on a Zoom call once. I've never met him in person, but he's great. And it turns out he's the director of The Last of Us. And a couple of years ago, we were working on this puzzle together. We were trying to figure this thing out, and it was just breaking us. Finally, he said, I'll try to work on it tomorrow, but I got to go catch a plane to the Emmys. What? The Emmy Awards? And another friend of ours said, yeah, you should come along. Come along to the Emmy Awards? Like, okay, and who are you? So I looked him up, and sure enough, he's Craig Mazin, who has written and directed The Last of Us, as well as HBO's Chernobyl, which was amazing. I thought, wait a second, this is the guy that I've been solving puzzles with? So all kinds of fun connections like that. I just love the puzzling world. And these days, my kids and I don't know how we got in this habit, maybe during the pandemic, but every night before dessert, I make up a little puzzle for them. So sometimes there'll be coin weighing puzzles, or sometimes I'll make up a Sudoku or a variant puzzle or a tiny crossword or something like a math puzzle. I trick them into doing math. So it's been really fun to have that tradition in our family.
We just spoke with the founder of Nerdle and how he incorporates these little math games at his dinner table with his kids and everything. That's great. I'm looking forward to doing the same. They're still a little young, but so you were doing and building crossword puzzles. When did Xword Info come around, and when did you start that with? It sounds like you co-founded that with Jim Horn.
Jim's been he started it 15 years ago, roughly, and 5 years into it, he decided he wanted to stop. And by that time, he had made it such a valuable tool for a constructor like me. I was on there fairly frequently using the Finder tool to look up specific letter patterns that I needed to fill. And when he announced that he was going to shut the site down, I realized that he only lives about half an hour away from me. So we kind of coordinated and got together and liked each other and super fun. And he said, I just can't spend the time doing this anymore. It's just way too much of a commitment. And frankly, it's not that much fun anymore for me. And a lot of people had come forth and said, can I take it over? And Jim said, well, do you know SQL? Do you know C++, JavaScript, HTML? And do you know how to work a database? And almost all the time people would say, I don't know any of those things. And I also said, I don't know any of those things. But I like the idea of the challenge of it and trying to figure things out. And Jim sort of looked at me and said, well, we could try it. And I could tell like he was thinking, this is not
there's no way.
Yeah, exactly. But we got together, and I'm a recreational coder, so I just kind of hammer things away with total brute force. So he kind of laughed at some of the things I was trying to do, and he said, all right, sure, let's try this. Let's see how it goes. And I decided that I wanted to write some commentary just to kind of keep things positive and light in the crossword world, or the cross world, as we like to call it sometimes. And just had a lot of fun doing that. And I had even asked Will Schwartz if, should I write something that was just pointing out the positives of each puzzle? Because there's a lot of negativity in the world. And he said, no, I don't want you to do that. I want you to give me fair opinions that give both the positives and the negatives. So no one's going to believe you or put any stock in what you say if you're just pointing out the rosiness of a crossword. So yeah, I mean, try to look at things from both sides. So my background isn't as an engineer. And I tend to think things through technically. So a lot of my blog commentary was about the technical aspects of putting together each puzzle and how kind of opening up the curtain behind the entire thing. And it was really fun for me to do that for 10 years. And when I hit the 10-year point, I think I had gotten repetitive and I just didn't have that much more to say. So, and I also had this project that Squeezy that I was interested in spending more time on, and that helped me free things up quite a bit. But Jim and I still remain good friends, and he's been working on Squeezy with me, developing the server side applications that we need to get the data to users every day, and it's been really fun having this new project with him.
Yes, which we will get to in a second. I am kind of curious though. So you are running Xword Info still, or not?
Well, not on a daily basis anymore.
Okay.
Jim still uploads the puzzles that we get from the New York Times team, but it's more like whenever he can get around to them. So maybe every other week, once a month, uploads a bolus, and we try to keep it up to date. We do still maintain our word list. So I upload a big bolus of words once a quarter, roughly, just to make sure that we have kind of the most up-to-date, the freshest entries, and also things that have fallen out of favor. We score down to the point where people shouldn't be using them as much. And when the puzzles do come in, when Jim uploads them, we try to score all the new stuff, the debut material, so that, at least you get a sense for, is this something that I should use all the time, or should I be a little more careful about when I need to dip into this well?
Yeah, I was looking kind of at the analytics of this. I don't know how much you track, but it was, according to SimilarWeb, it's like 250,000 visitors to that site every month. Incredibly popular. And it looks like you have a kind of a support subscription model in place for that. Does that just kind of help cover costs, or has that actually been like, helps you a little bit more than that overall?
Mostly cover cost. There's just so much database management and bandwidth that we have to pay for. So it's, it's very expensive to run, unfortunately. And we tried to figure out ways of kind of either selling it to somebody or porting it over somewhere, but things just haven't worked out. We're hopeful that we can kind of keep it running at this sort of lower level, every other week kind of thing for as long as possible. But, at this point, we can't make any guarantees.
Well, as you alluded to earlier, you are working on something new. And I'll just say personally, I came across this game. I think it was in Kevin Kelly's newsletter, who's the founder of Wired, or co-founder, and Recommendo. And I came across, and I just happened to land on it one day. I would love to hear more about this game. Tell us how it came to be, and what you're doing with it right now.
I've had a lot of different ideas for games over the years, and most of them just feel like sort of derivative or not that interesting. And I've tried to develop a couple of things just with PowerPoint slides so that I get a rough idea of, somebody can beta test it, something like that. And this particular one, I've always been interested in crosswords, where you have a word and you can cut out a couple letters and it becomes a different word, a different valid word. For some reason, it always just seems kind of magical to me. Or if you have a short word and you insert a couple letters, it becomes a longer word, which is also valid. There's just something neat about it. I don't know. There's something kind of like wizardly or something. So I came up with this idea of inserting letters into words. And at the very base idea, it was just kind of that. And I talked to David Steinberg, who's over at Andrews McMeel, and he really liked the idea and gave me some suggestions on how to improve it. I had given him a PowerPoint of a couple examples of just words that can transform into other words when you insert a certain letter or a couple of letters. And he noticed that the example that I gave that had 6 letter insertions, those 6 letters, if you anagram them, they become a real word. And he said, why don't you do something with that? I thought, well, that's a great idea. And they were interested in kicking it around and seeing, if they could prototype it, beta test it, that sort of thing. But they just didn't have the bandwidth or the resources. And then their programmer quit. So David was like, at this point, we can't pursue this. And so I sat around for a while and I thought, I don't want to wait. I don't want to pay somebody to do this, especially because I wouldn't know what they were doing. And every time I wanted to change something, I'd have to contact them and explain it. Why don't I just figure this out myself? And it turned out to be pretty difficult. I watched a lot of videos. I watched a lot of YouTube. I started with Wordle clones. So there are a lot of people out there who noticed how popular Wordle was and then figured out, I'll make a video on how to make a Wordle clone in an hour using basic HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And so I watched, I don't know, half a dozen of those, and I didn't understand a thing. I probably picked up 5% of each one of them. But then I watched some more and I picked up another 10%. And I got to the point where I could start, like I could put together some basic HTML, and I know enough like basic computer programming to write some JavaScript behind it. And it took me probably 2 months to come up with my very first prototype, which I was so proud of. And I took it downstairs and I showed Jill and the kids, and I said, oh yeah, all you do is just, tap on this, move it over here. And they're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And they went, okay, now I just want to move it backwards because I didn't put it in the right place. Oh, yeah, I don't have a way to reset it. What do you mean? So I just have to reload the entire game yeah. And Jill was like, oh, okay, well, great. I remember thinking that night, this is impressive. I learned all this stuff. How come you're not more impressed? And we went out to dinner a week later, and I just kind of mentioned it with a laugh. And she said, I never thought about how much effort it takes to figure something like that out. I mean, honestly, when you look at it, you're just moving a tile from here to there. There's no undo. You can't remove tiles once you're done. You don't even have a reset or anything like that. I mean, it's, those are things that you could consider adding later on. And I thought, yeah, you're right. So I went back and made a second prototype, which had a lot of these features. And by that time, I kind of had gotten up the learning curve and gotten the ball rolling, so I could figure out a lot of logic behind moving tiles around and resets and hints and things like that. So at that point, I had switched things so that instead of the secret word appearing at the end when you're done and you're like, oh, wow, that's cool, I had started with the secret word on the tile side, on the left side. So you would take this word, this perfectly valid word, and break it up into bits over here. And I tested it out with some people, and they thought, well, why'd you do that? That's terrible. So I went back and built a third prototype, and then I kept on changing things back and forth, 4 different levels versus 2 different levels. And I came up with the idea of connecting the secret answers from the 3 different levels. And Jill suggested, why don't you have people kind of guess, like put 3 buttons here and say, these are the 3 answers. Which of these 3 buttons, 3 options connects with the theme? And that would help kind of prove that you figured it out. I thought, oh, that's a great idea. So that took forever to implement because there's a lot of logic behind it. And I tested it out. Some people loved it. I thought, oh, great, fantastic. But a lot of people, I think it's the same, the majority of people thought, there's no way I would have ever gotten that. And then some people got super frustrated. Like, you're expecting to guess what the fuck Jeff is thinking? This is terrible. I thought, okay, well, maybe that's just a couple people. And then my twin brother, identical twin brother, who was testing it at the time as well, kind of gave me the same feedback and said, look, there's no way I would have ever gotten that. And at best, it's frustrating. So I slept on it a couple nights and decided to take out the buttons. And I think overall that was a good idea. But I still get a lot of feedback these days that I'd kind of like some way to prove that I can guess the theme. Like, oh, God, I don't know what the right answer is. And just like with most of my life, I don't know what the right answer is.
That's a good place to be, is just uncomfortable and not knowing what the right answer is.
Absolutely.
It strikes me, Jeff, I think across a couple of your stories here, you're super persistent. Whether it's sending 20 crossword submissions in and 19 rejections or whatever the numbers were, and 3 prototypes and not maybe the warmest feedback on the first one. I just got to say kudos to your persistence. I don't have a question around that, but like, I think it just demonstrates, like you've got a real skill here and good work.
Thanks. There's a fine line between persistence and stupidity, and I don't know which side I'm on.
Well, as somebody who's really enjoyed Squeezy since discovering it, I think it's time well spent.
Thank you.
I'm curious about so many aspects of this game, but let's start with, so you built your first prototype. How long ago was that very first prototype that you built?
Kind of back in September, October.
And when was the first daily launch to the public?
January 31st. Back in November, I sent Jim a screenshot I had mocked up saying Squeezy, launch the first Squeezy #1, February 1st. And he said, okay. And he said, well, if you want to work really hard over the holidays and bang your head for most of January, yeah, that could be realistic. And I thought, okay, I could do that.
So I guess one of my next questions then is, I played earlier today. I can't remember. It must have been number 37 or number 38. Are you using a generator for any of these, or are you manually creating all the puzzles yourself?
Yeah, mostly same with crosswords, kind of same approach that I come up with an idea. It doesn't have to be as tight or as interesting an idea sometimes. And there's only 3 answers instead of 4 answers. So it's pretty easy for me to come up with dozens, hundreds of ideas that I can kind of play with and cull through. But then at that point, kind of figuring out how to break up the secret words, and then what letters fit into what words to make those secret words up. At first it took me about 2 hours maybe to create a puzzle, but these days I've picked up steam and created some spreadsheets that help me figure out what possibilities are available for each letter or for each pair or triplet of letters. So it probably takes half an hour to crank things out. So when we first launched, I had 50 games made, and now I'm at 180 roughly. So about 6 months.
Well, that was like one of the next things I was going to ask is how far ahead have you worked here? That's really cool. I think on, so many of these puzzles, like I think a lot of people, whether explicitly stated or not, like they get kind of emphatic around like, well, there can only be one solution. And it kind of was interesting to me just thinking about Squeezy. And if you're not using a generator, do you end up giving a lot of thought to like, is there some alternate solution that somebody could stumble onto with this? And is that a hard problem to think through, or is it really not that common?
It's a difficult problem to think through. And Jim and I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to programmatically check for those things. So he's helped me with a couple of validation steps to make sure that there's not another possible, well, especially like you don't want to have a word like cap and you insert an R, it can either become carp or crap. You could code it so that both are accepted as correct answers, but it's just not, it's at the very least inelegant, and it kind of feels bad, I think, if you could put it in either of those places and then just have it be counted as correct. So one thing that was really surprising, that was really difficult to predict. Well, there's been a lot of stuff that's just kind of taken me by surprise, and I'm like, I got to get on and fix this. Like one time in the Wheezy mode, there's been a lot of call for like crossword people want this to be harder. So I made an easy mode or a breezy mode for just regular folks, and Wheezy mode for people who want a real challenge. And I always have an extra tile, and that extra tile isn't just to kind of keep you from anagramming the word in your head, but it's also possible to insert it in a certain place or multiple places and kind of mislead you. But one point, there was a puzzle where the answer was Jillian, and it was the first letter was a J inserted into moo to make mojo. But the extra tile I had put was an M. And somebody wrote me and said, my streak is broken. I got this wrong because I put the M in to make a momo, which is a type of food, and it made millions instead of Jillian. And I thought, no, I didn't even, how am I supposed to figure this out? So thankfully, I quickly corrected that just by changing the extra tile. But I'm sure there are going to be other things that are unexpected that I have to figure out. Jim has been, he's such a strong programmer that he's helped figure a lot of this stuff out and pointed a lot of these things out to me. So,
speaking of that, I'm just curious, where'd the lemon theme for the game come up with, or where'd you come up with that?
One of my wife's Wordle group friends said, I'd originally come up with the idea of calling it Squeezy because you're squeezing a letter into a word. And my kids say easy peasy lemon squeezy all the time. So then I started, at first I kind of just called it easy, medium, and hard. And then I thought I was going to try these things like breezy, wheezy, squeezy, queasy, or something like that. And I put a lemon logo in for lemon squeezy or something. And my wife's friend suggested just leaning into the entire thing and just go with lemons. And, maybe you could have like lemons exploding on the screen if you solve it correctly. And I thought, I don't know how to do that. But what I could do is I can make them dance around a little bit. So that's about it. Yeah, on my list of things to do and work on, I'd love to have some sort of lemon animation but my skills are still somewhat limited.
Jeff, my background is in design and branding, and I have to say there might be a hack here for people looking for names of companies to go seek out crossword puzzle builders, because I think it's absolutely brilliant. I love the theme. I love the name. It kind of feels like a New York Times game, just the way that, the green kind of floods out, full bleed on the page. And was that intentional, taking some of the aesthetics from a New York Times game?
Yeah. I think especially during the pandemic, my wife got super into the spelling bee. So she would spend an hour, and sometimes during our date nights, we would just hang out and try to figure out how to get the queen bee. What's the 4-letter word starting with T that we're missing or something like that. And then Connections came along, and they even beta tested this game called Digits, which we both liked. Unfortunately, they killed that game. But so much of what the New York Times games department has done has been such a huge success that it was only natural to kind of look at how they laid things out. The idea that there would be one puzzle a day felt really strong from Wordle's background. So absolutely, I think the biggest compliment is to copy, and I compliment a lot of what they do.
You put so much thought and intentionality into the game design and getting feedback ahead of time. Curious, as you were thinking about launching the game, and you kind of put that stake in the ground that you were going to launch on February 1st. What were you planning ahead in terms of getting the word out? And how did you think about things like distribution and marketing?
I'm terrible with social media, so that was the big challenge for me. But thankfully, I've built up a big network of crossword friends. most of which I've never met, but going to the crossword tournament every year back when I didn't have kids, was able to just establish a lot of friendships. So that was the biggest way. But surprisingly enough, my kids' elementary school, the teachers really got into it and started sharing it with some of the parents. And I'm going to give a presentation next week on for Pi Day on software development, stuff like that. So it's been great. Just a lot of local people have kind of clung on to it and started spreading the word. So a lot of word of mouth.
I got to say, just personally, as a startup founder who thinks a lot about go-to-market, you're certainly putting in the hustle and the legwork of, even as I was emailing you, like, it was tell your friends, tell your family, and you're embedding that in every email. So that's great.
But if you have any ideas, I would love to hear about spreading the word. I would have been happy to have, just 100 people a day doing it, but just blown us away at having several thousand people a day. And I would love to grow that to, 50,000 at the end of the year. Or, that's kind of the stretch goal, but, just to have something, it's such a pleasure to create this thing that probably at least once a day I get an email from somebody, some random person saying, I love this game, or, I don't understand the connection. Can you explain it to me? And it's just fun to have the interaction.
So you haven't talked to the New York Times yet about
No, we definitely kind of nudge, let them know, like, we have a lot of people solving this, and a lot of people saying, gosh, why don't you just have the New York Times buy it? Well, I'd be open to talking, certainly.
If only it were that easy.
I had discussions with some other parties as well. So
you mentioned a kind of a stretch goal for the end of this year, 50K. I don't know. I'm curious, like, do you have, I know it's early, but do you have any ambitions for this, past the end of the year? Are you working on other games?
Well, at some point, it would be great to get paid for doing this. I don't know. It would have to be for the right party, under the right conditions, because I enjoy doing it so much. But yeah, absolutely, it would be fun to have a partnership, that, especially one that would allow the user base to exponentially grow. But for now, I just enjoy having the connection with people and, creating something that a lot of people seem to be really enjoying. It brings me a lot of joy just to kind of know that. So, especially when I'm failing with my kids.
Well, it's a journey. We were talking beforehand. It sounds like you've got 2 kids. I know both Nate and I do, all different ages, but it's a journey, right? And yeah,
absolutely.
Well, I could talk your ear off all day long about Squeezy or just some of these past experiences, but it sounds like you've got another release coming up later this year. Perhaps in book form. Do you want to tell us more about that?
Yeah. My writing career has been a lot like my crossword career, where it's a fine line between persistence and stupidity, and failing at kind of every point along the way, but getting right back up. And, like failing with my first agent, failing with my first book, failing with my first book shopped around, and finally getting to the point where my agent sold Ultra Ball. But after that, I've been writing a lot of puzzle books and putting other proposals together. And a guy named AJ Jacobs, who's just an amazing writer, I've read all of his books, got in touch with me saying that, could he get a plug on Xword Info about his latest book called The Puzzler, which, if you haven't read it, it's fantastic, really entertaining nonfiction about the world of puzzling. And, so I said, absolutely, happy to do that. So afterward, he said, hey, I'd like you to put you in touch with a friend of mine, this guy, Stuart Gibbs, who's a children's book writer. And I said, the Stuart Gibbs? You mean the guy who I've read all his books and I would love to have kind of a writing career like his? He's a best-selling New York Times author. He's got 3 series out that are just huge hits at my kids' school, and I've read all of. I had read them before my kids were even born, just because I was so entertained, and so I was intimidated. And I thought, I'll wait a couple of days before I email him because I don't even know what to say. And before I did that, Stuart emailed me and said, "Gosh, I'm such a huge fan of your puzzles. This is so cool to meet you." And I said, "What? What's going on here?" And so we started chatting, and it was fun because he's really into crosswords and likes puzzles, and just is entertained every day with not just crosswords, but the other New York Times games and other kinds of things. And I thought, what would be really fun is if we could do a puzzle book around one of your series. And I kind of proposed something around this Fun Jungle series that he's got. I really like those books. And he said, my spy school books are by far and away my biggest successes. They're just like selling like hotcakes. There's 11 books in that series now, and people are just clamoring for more and more. What do you think about that? I thought, oh, yeah, okay, let me think about it. And I came back a couple of weeks later with a proposal. I had fleshed out some ideas on like how to get 8 different types of puzzles to come out with answers, and those 8 answers work together. And so I sketched things out enough so that he could kind of understand what was going on. And I didn't think anything of it. It's just kind of fun to do. And I sent it to him, and he said, "Wow, this is really fun. It's super entertaining." I didn't hear back from him for a month or 2. And I thought, well, didn't go anywhere. And then my agent got in touch with me and said, "Hey, what do you know about this contract Stuart sent over?" I said, "What contract?" In my previous books, it's always been this horrendous process of, all right, you got to get the book ready for submission. You have to make a list of the different editors you want to talk to. You have to go back and forth, figure it out. And, it might take a year. I think the first book we shopped around, it was about a year and a half before we finally called it and decided there's been some interest, not enough interest. It doesn't quite fit for our series, our offerings. And it's just been such a hard process. Even Ultra Ball, which was only on submission for 2 weeks before it got picked up, it was really stressful, and you kind of figure out like you got to have these 2 parties that you're trying to get the best deal, and what should we do? And this time, Stuart's agent just sent over an offer, and my initial response was, "Let's take it." My agent said, "Well, hold on a sec. Let me ask for X more." And I said, "No, don't mess this up." And he said, "It's not going to hurt. Trust me on this." And they took what he countered with. And okay, let's go ahead and do it. So we've been working on it for the past year and are now into the layout phase. And it's scheduled, I think, to release in fall of 2024. It's called Spy School Entrance Exam. So that if kids can come up with the correct 8 answers and figure out how they work together, which is definitely doable. Like some of my beta testers have figured it out. They can enter their answer into a website and gain kind of admission to Spy School. Kind of a series of prizes, basically. So, yeah, it's super, super fun, and been enjoying working with Stuart and just the power that he's got, the leverage. He's got an entire team behind him, and kind of sends in these sketches, and the art department scurries off to go to work and produces something. And it's amazing. And it's just an honor to be part of the process.
That all is incredible. And I'm so curious what a day in the life looks like for you working on Squeezy and writing. Like, how do you have a schedule of writing? I'm curious. I write a little bit, but I've never written a book.
Yeah, I try to spend an hour or two in the mornings. Right now, it's been mostly dedicated to Squeezy because I'm so interested in having an incredible amount of fun putting the puzzles together that sometimes I just let the writing slip. But I'll try to force myself to work on a project. Right now, I've got edits that I have to go back through for spy school entrance exam. So there's a deadline that I have to meet. But after I get that done, I'll go back to another project that I've been drafting out and try to avoid getting sucked into just making Squeezy puzzles from 8 till 5 because they're just so much fun to put together. I know there's something satisfying about it. Like when you solve a crossword puzzle, it's fun because you get to the last square and you fill it in and you think it's complete. I did something. And it's even better when you make a crossword puzzle because it's really difficult and you get to the point where finally after 5 hours, I figured this horrendous problem out and I filled in the last square and it all works out fantastic. Squeezy, there's something super satisfying about working on something for half an hour and kind of nailing it, getting it done, and then moving on and churning through. Like by the end of the day, if I've made 10 puzzles, God, it feels great. But basically, I don't have a fixed schedule unless one of my editors or agent comes back and says, look, you got to get this done by Monday. So right now I'm on deadline, so I have to shuffle things around. But otherwise, I'm in a really lucky position to be able to make my own schedule and kind of work on what sounds interesting, which was fantastic. I didn't think that I had no expectation that spy school entrance exam was going to go anywhere. But because I was able to free up a lot of time to come up with this draft to show Stuart, things got rolling and it was great. So hopefully more stuff like that will come along.
Jeff, what are some takeaways from building your games that might help aspiring game creators?
The thing that people ought to remember is that the persistence, that's the biggest factor. And it's really difficult to know when to say, okay, let's just change course. It was so important to listen to beta testers. You know, even if you're married to something, you just can't be married to any one particular feature. So super important to get testers and listen to what they're saying. And then being okay with spending an incredible amount of time for something that may or may not pan out. Learning to live with frustration.
Jeff, I'm sure you'll want people to check out Squeezy. So if you could give us the address for that, and then, where can people find you online more generally?
So the website is imsqueezy.com. I'm in Squeezy. There's no space or underline or anything, just imsqueezy.com. And my contact information is on the front page of that. So you can write me that way. Or you can also go to jeffchenwrites.com, CHEN, not any other spelling. And my contact information is there as well. And don't hesitate to contact me. It's really fun for me to hear from people. And I get a lot of people asking me, can you help me get published somewhere with the crossword idea? And I don't know how to go about technically putting this thing together. And I love doing that kind of thing. It's been kind of the biggest change for me over the past 5 years is that I used to kind of do it because I had a lot of interesting ideas, or what I thought were interesting ideas I wanted to make into crosswords. But I find so much more pleasure now in helping others achieve their bucket list goals or their items. Just the other day, I've been working with a woman who's 70, something like that, and has always wanted to make a crossword. And she's solved crosswords for decades now. So it's been super fun to help her craft her idea into something that hopefully the New York Times will take now. And, that's the kind of thing there, it's great seeing others' excitement at the first acceptance, that kind of thing, and living vicariously again through them.
Well, that's great. You're definitely paying forward what Will Shortz did to invest in you. Thanks a lot for being here, Jeff. Really appreciate the insight and in your background. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you guys have any ideas that could help out Squeezy, spread the word, or features, or any feedback, I'd love to hear them. I mean, I'm always open to different ideas, and whatever I can do, however hard I can work on something, I'm absolutely willing to do it. So if anyone out there has suggestions, please drop me a line, and I'd love to chat about anything that might be interesting.
That's great.